Morning everyone. This morning I'm going to tell you a little bit more about myself in terms of some of my choices around my lifestyle and specifically my diet. So for many of you probably already know, but many don't, that I am a vegan. I don't necessarily like to call myself a vegan, but it's the easiest way to explain that I try my best and while I do all I can to avoid consuming any animal products at all. And there's a reason for that. It's not because I have a deep belief that human beings are not supposed to consume animal products. It's purely because, as many of you know, I did a series on my personal values. One of those values is be kind always. And if I look at what I believe a kind person is, a kind person would never fund and support an industry that breeds animals into existence, tortures them, kills them before their life expectancy, all, in my opinion, for unnecessary consumption amounts. And again, I'm not trying to stand here and say that human beings are not supposed to, we're not designed to eat animal products. I'm not saying that at all. I don't know enough, to be honest. But what I do know is that the majority of human beings can thrive on a predominantly plant-based diet, and the science and the data is out there, it doesn't lie, specifically around heart disease and the impacts of animal protein on your heart, specifically red meat, but that's beside the point. The point is, we don't need all of this animal products, all of this red meat, this chicken, this fish, etc., 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 to thrive. So even the reduction of animal consumption for me is a huge win. But again, for me, kind being a value of mine, I don't believe, and this is personal, right? I don't judge anyone else. Almost all of my friends are not vegan. Few of them are, but almost all aren't. Almost all of my family aren't vegan. I still love them. I still hang out with them. We still have amazing times. This is just a personal belief to me. I don't believe I personally can identify as a kind human being and fund and support an industry that purely breeds animals into existence and tortures them for the purposes of making money in a world where it is not necessary for us to consume that much meat, dairy, etc. I don't believe we need to consume dairy at all. And if you imagine what the majority of dairy farms are, and I do believe that there are probably some that exist that are much more humane, but the majority of the mass producing dairy milk farms, if you consider what it means to produce cow's milk for human consumption, a cow needs to be impregnated against its will. It needs to be pregnant. It needs to go through that pregnancy. It needs to give birth to a calf. That calf then needs to be stolen from that cow. And if you can imagine, it's a well-known fact, obviously cows are sentient beings. They have children. They want those children, just like any other species or just like human beings. We steal those calves away purely so that we can then steal the milk that was intended for that calf. We milk the crap out of that cow for as long as we can until it stops producing enough to be profitable, and then we rinse and repeat. We impregnate it again, and repeat the cycle until that cow gets to an age where it simply doesn't produce enough milk to be profitable, and then it gets killed well before its life expectancy. It's a horrendous industry. It's an unnecessary industry. Human beings do not need cow's milk. Again, the data and the facts and the information all exist. It's purely for money-making purposes for farmers. And this is not, I'm not trying to ruin human beings making a living on dairy farms, but, there's plenty of other things that can be farmed in a much kinder way. And so that's just one example. And that really, for me, is why I choose to not consume animal products, because I don't believe personally I can say to the world I'm a kind human being, but I also fund and support these industries. If you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the comments. Again, I also, and this is why I don't necessarily like to identify as a vegan, because I know a lot of vegans would be outraged by what I'm about to say, but I believe that if you hunted your food ethically, i.e. you went out and, let's say, for example, I know we're not in America, but let's use elk as an example, because I know in the hunting world that's probably something that's often referred to as what is being hunted. So let's say you go and you find an older elk that's lived a good life, and you hunt it, you harvest its meat, and you use that meat to feed your family for months. That's probably, in some respects, there's less guilt and less harm done in that than buying a bag of broccoli from Woolworths, because there's also a lot of death involved in agriculture in general, but agriculture of plant-based food like vegetables. If you imagine the space and the practices that take place, there's a lot of death involved, but it's not the same type of death. It's not breeding an animal into existence, torturing it for its whole life, and then killing it before its life expectancy. It's basically a life of misery for human benefit, and so it's different. And so yeah, any questions, throw them in the comments, but just wanted to share a little bit about myself. And from a leadership perspective, I think it's really important to be your own greatest leader. For me, not eating plant-based is not in line with the majority of people I hang out with. It's seen as, and although it's becoming more popular, it's still seen as very, outside of the norm, and it's often an awkward conversation, especially when you go out to eat meals at restaurants with people who don't necessarily know what your dietary choices are like. But at the end of the day, if I can't stay true to my own values, then how can I expect anyone else to?